This is Jenny Kunkel, and in this video we're going to take a look at a trigger that's going to fire after insert, update, and delete. To get started, let's go ahead and let's create a new database table. This is going to be in our Northwinds database. So we're going to use Northwinds. I'm essentially just going to paste this in. We are going to be basing this off of our plain table. And for our table, we're going to create the plain history table. It's going to be defined with a plain hist ID that's going to use an identity field. It's going to have a change indicator, a change date, the old serial number, new serial number, old plain type code, new plain type code, old next service date, new next service date, old last service date, and new last service date. So we're going to go ahead and execute this, create that table. We should be able to refresh and see that table. There we have our plain history with all those columns, and we're going to use that as a basis for creating our trigger. The whole concept here is we want to essentially track what happens to our plain table. Maybe this is deemed a critical table for our system that we're trying to create here. And we need to make sure that we track anybody that is inserting anything, when it gets changed, and when it gets deleted from the system. We want a table that's going to have all of this information that if we need to do some analysis based off of a particular serial number, we can pull it up, take a look at what has transpired with this particular serial number. So let's go ahead and let's get started. We're going to create a trigger, and we're going to name this trigger plain history. So this is going to be drop trigger if exists. We're going to name it TRG plain history. Then we're going to go ahead and create the trigger. We're going to use the Go to separate this into its own batch. We have our trigger, and this is TRG plain history. We need to specify what table we are going to be placing this on, and this is going to go on our plain table. Whenever somebody inserts or updates or deletes a record from the plain table, we want to be able to track the history on that. So it's going to be on that dbo.plain table. And we are going to be looking for doing something, or little bits of code that we're going to write after we insert a row, after we update a row, or after we delete a row from the table. And this is going to be after insert, update, delete. We're going to start our block and put our ending for our block for our trigger. We want to go ahead and set our no count on. We don't necessarily want it generating any output from this based off of how many rows get updated or whatever. This is a trigger. We shouldn't be outputting anything. We are going to then declare a bunch of variables. We essentially want to get a change indicator, because we have a change indicator field up here. We're going to essentially get a new and old serial number, a new and old plain type code, a new and old service, and a new and old last service date. So we need to go ahead and set up some variables for this. I'm just going to copy this. We'll use this as a starting place for setting up our new variables. So we're going to come down here, and after our new count on, paste this in, and we're going to go ahead and do declare. I'm going to go ahead and essentially put an @ here and copy and paste this portion before all of this. Then I want to go ahead and get rid of the ending. Get rid of any of the not nulls. We just want to leave the type here. Now we did go a little bit overboard. We don't really need our change date we can just use the get date for storing that. And then we want to go ahead, and our change indicator is going to be based off of whether we're inserting, whether we're updating, or whether we're deleting. So we need to be able to track that, and we're going to go ahead and use an if exists on this. So if exists, and this is going to be select asterisk from inserted. We want to check that. It's going to be an insert if it's in this table and not in the delete table, but if it's in this table and it's in the deleted table, then it's going to be an update. And exists select asterisk from deleted. Then we're going to set our @ change indicator equal to U. Else if exists select asterisk from inserted. We know it's not in deleted. We're going to set this equal to I for inserted. Else, we're going to go ahead and set our @ change indicator equal to D for deleted. Now that we have our indicator set up, we can make changes and retrieve values based off of that. So when we are inserting or updating, we have fields that are going to be in the inserted. Those would be considered to be our new values. So in this case, if we have an @ change indicator equal I, or an @ change indicator equal to U, then we want to go ahead and select the @ new serial equal to our serial number, comma, our @new plain type code equal to the plain type code, comma, @new next service state equal to the next service state, comma, @new last service date equal to the last service date. And this is going to be from the inserted table. We're essentially going to copy this and just change from old to new. And this is going to be for when we have our change indicator equal to a D or a U. When we have something that's a D or U, it's either going to be the values that were in the table before it was deleted, or the values that were in the table before it was changed. So we're going to set those to old, basically copying this, replacing them here, and changing this to deleted. So that takes care of those situations, but we also have situations where we're inserting something and we have values that are going to not be there. For instance, when we insert something, we have new values. We don't have any old values, so we need to set those values to null. So in this case, we want to add another if statement. And this is going to be if our @ change indicator is equal to I, then we want to go ahead and use the begin, because we're going to have several statements here and an end. And we're going to go ahead and set our @old serial null equal to null. Set the @old plain type code equal to null. Set the @old next service date equal null. Set old last service state equal to null. And we also have the situation that if we're deleting something, we have old values, but we don't have any new, so we need to set those equal to null. So we're going to copy this block here and change it out slightly. Let's move it over. And these are going to be delete, and we're just going to change this to new. And now we have all of our values that are set to insert into our plain hist table, and we can go ahead and do that. We're going to use a begin try because we might have some type of an issue when we're trying to insert, typically when we're doing validations or when we're doing our insert. We want to go ahead and make sure that we use a begin try, end try, and then begin catch, end catch to take care of any exceptions that may be raised. In this case, we're going to do a begin try. We're going to have an end try. We're going to have a begin catch. And we're going to have an end catch. Within our end catch, we want to throw a little bit more user-friendly message, and this is just going to be basically saying that we're unable to insert record into the plain history table, and we can do that with a throw statement. And we can use codes that are greater than 50,000. So I'm going to use 50,001, and this is going to be unable to insert record into plain history table. And now within our begin try, we're going to go ahead and insert into the dbo.plain history the change indicator, the change date, the old serial null, the new serial null, the old plain type, the new plain type, the old next service state, the new next service state, the old last service state, and then finally the new last service state. We're going to be providing values for this to be our at change indicator. Also using the get date to get our current date that the activity is happening. This is going to be our at old serial null, followed by our at new serial null, followed by our at old plain type code, and then our at new plain type code, and our at old next service state, and our at new next service state, followed by our at old last service state and our at old new last service state. And that should pretty much take care of what we need to do. So anytime we insert into our plain table, if we update anything in our plain table or we delete anything in our plain table, we're automatically going to write out to our history table activity that indicates what was added, what was deleted, what was changed in the table, and we'll take a look at what that looks like. We want to go ahead and make sure that we can run our statement in to create our trigger. Let's go ahead and try that. It seems like it's successful, and we can go ahead and try this. So we're going to first start with an insert statement. We're just going to basically mess around with one statement here. And this is going to be inserting into our dbo.plane. We want to go ahead and insert one row. This is going to be serial, no, plain type code. Next service date, and our last service date. We're going to insert values AA, BB, CC, 23484, followed by B, 730, and we're going to do a date add. This is going to be year -3, using our get date, followed by date add year -4, and then get date here as well. We should be able to go ahead and insert a record. We see that we have one row that was affected by that insert, and if we take a look at what we have in our plain hist, execute this statement, we should have one row out there, and we can see that we have old values that are null, but we have the new values that indicate what was inserted into the table. Then if we decide that we want to go ahead and update something in that table, maybe we want to change our last service date and our next service date, so we're going to do an update dbo.plane. We're going to set the last service date equals to get date, and then our next service date equal to date add, passing in 1 to get the next year from get date. And we want to do this where our serial no is equal to our value that we used up here. I'm just going to copy it so I don't mess it up. If we execute this statement, then we should see that we have one row affected. If we go ahead and select from the table, now we see that we have an update. We can see the values that were there before and the values now. The old value, the new value is going to be 226. Our old value was 222. We have our old service date of 21, and we have our new service date of 25. Now if we decide that we want to delete something from the dbo.plane table, and I'm just going to put this where clause here, that's where we're going to be deleting by. If we execute this, we should see that we have one row affected, and then we can go ahead and execute and see that we are actually inserting the old values, and then the nulls reflect the current state where we don't have a record in the table at this point because of that delete action, and of course we have the date of that activity. So this is a way that we can track history. The next thing that we want to test is we want to test our exception handling to make sure that we can get back that error message that we put in there. And in order to do this, one of the ways that we can trick it is to try to go ahead and reset our seed value. That should force it to fail. We can go ahead and do a dbcc check ident and give it the table. This is going to be the plain history table. We're going to tell it to reseed and set that reseed value to 0. If we execute that, it's going to give us a little bit of a message telling what that last identity was that was assigned, and then it's going to take care of doing that. We can then go ahead and create another insert statement and change up our values here. Maybe make it 3, 3, 4, 4, 9 or something like that. And if we try to insert it, we should see that we are getting our custom exception being thrown. The next thing that we want to do, though, is to change this. This is the 2012 and greater. Before 2012, there was a raise error. We want to try that as well. So we can replace this with a raise error. And here we're going to pass in our message. We're going to pass in the same message. We also need to pass in the severity. We're going to make it 16, and then the state is going to be 1. We need to re-execute and create our trigger in order to get these changes to be in effect. Now we can go ahead and try to insert that statement once again. And we can see that we're getting a little bit more information back now. We are getting our user-defined message, but we're getting more information back, indicating that the batch was aborted and the user transaction as well. Everything was rolled back in this instance. So that's a way that we can add our own custom messages.